Today, we're getting into one of those topics everybody talks about, but not many people really unpack. What culture actually looks like as companies grow and change. I'm Matt Wheeler, and today I'm joined by Christian Haverkamp, Director of Human Resources and Leadership Development at Thompson Holdings. In this conversation today, we're going to discuss what actually keeps culture from falling apart as companies grow, change, or go through big transitions, how cultures show up day to day through decisions, systems, and the employee experience, not just the values that they outline in the handbook, why clarity and intention matters so much for trust, engagement, and keep people around long term. And now, a quick word from our sponsor.
Giving gifts to your employees rocks. Forgetting gifts for your employees sucks. Employee appreciation boosts retention by 48%. But tracking the dates is tedious, finding gifts is overwhelming, and it's too easy for people to fall through the cracks. ThanksCrate makes employee appreciation easy, so you never forget another gift again. Simply connect your payroll provider to get all your employees, their birthdays, and milestones in one place. Book a call with a ThanksCrate gifting agent to design your employee appreciation plan so you can be the rockstar workplace that never forgets anyone. ThanksCrate. Book a call with your gifting agent now.
Hi, Matt Wheeler here on the Good Human podcast. Today we have Christian Haverkamp, the Director of Human Resources and Leadership Development at Thompson Holdings. Christian, how are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Matt?
Living the dream here in Tampa, Florida.
Very good. Very good.
We're very excited to have you here today and learn a little bit more about your background in HR, not even specifically to just Thompson, but your career in general. It looks really exciting in that space and the experience you bring to the table. Just to kind of give a little premise, the Good Human Company, the concept of this is that we're all aspiring to be good humans within a company. And it's not that we think that any of us are perfect at that. We talk to multiple people and we want to learn from them to figure out what are some of the things that they're doing that have worked and how can we incorporate that a little bit into our business so that we can become, more able to achieve a good human company status, even though I think it's always a work in process. So one of the things I wanted to start with today was when we talk about companies growing, because I know that you guys are, a growing company, and maybe in this mix of a question, you can maybe frame up a little bit more about Thompson Holding and the company itself, but what actually keeps the culture there to stick, instead of slowly fading away as you're growing these companies and adding more resources, things like that.
Yeah. Well, I will say, like you mentioned, Thompson Holdings is in kind of an exponential growth mode right now. I started with Thompson about a year ago, and when I started having conversations with our CEO, Chad Brown, about joining Thompson, we were about 499 employees. We just acquired SourceToad, a company that you're very familiar with, and yes, that took us over 800 employees. So we are in an exponential growth mode right now. And I will tell you, the one thing that really sustains a culture in that mode is leadership. And that's at all levels of the organization. And what that translates to is really sustainable and scalable leadership development programs. And those are programs that can be adapted to the intended audience, right? So I was just down in the Marsh of Louisiana at a project site that, as you can imagine, the leadership style that works down there is very different from the leadership style that I'm promoting and training, to a finance professional here in my office in Mobile, for example. So it's making sure that as leaders, we know our audiences and that we're able to adapt that leadership training, that we're able to really promote that leadership training in a way that makes sense to our intended audience. So it's never a one size fits all, and it's always something that needs to be adaptable and able to roll out to the intended audience for sure.
Yeah, I love how you talk about, different areas. My background has been a lot in the sales side and managing sales, infrastructure, people, and that kind of thing. And I always talk to companies about, when you're hiring in different locations, it's a different play, right? If you were hiring in New York City versus the places you just mentioned, the personalities are going to be different. The culture is different. The way people are used to having communication is way different. So it sounds like you guys really are thoughtful about, who you're working with and maybe how it impacts them in that region. Yeah. From what you've seen, where do companies usually trip on that culture? As you're going in and like you just mentioned SourceToad, who I do have a really strong relationship with. And when you bring in another company like that, where do you think that companies usually can mess that culture up, so to say, or trip on culture?
Yeah. I think, culture is and change really, it's such an internal act of negotiation is what I think of it as. And it's such a, there's this quote I really love that what got us here won't get us there. You know what I mean? And that's it's such a powerful quote. And when you think about the internal negotiation that goes on, you have to be willing to grow. Obviously, everybody gets uncomfortable with growth. There's not a person in the world, if they are saying they're comfortable with growth, or change, they're lying. You know what I mean? Because everybody gets slightly uncomfortable in that space. But it's something that you have to get comfortable with, but you have to keep your core identity. If you lose track of that core identity, then you're kind of losing track of that culture as well. And so I think that when you get really into change, the core leadership group really has to be united in what is this change looking to solve, right? What are we trying to solve with this change? And if you can unite that core leadership group on what is the problem that we're trying to solve, and are we all united on this is a problem? We have to be united front on this is a problem. If we aren't united on that fact that this is a problem, then the change isn't going to be easily adapted to. The change isn't going to be easily adopted in that situation. And so the first step in any sort of change process, or getting to that point of, making sure that we don't have that struggle bus kind of happening all through the changes, let's get our minds wrapped around as a leadership group, what is the problem we're trying to solve with this change? And if we can get there as a step one, then we're going to have a lot better chance of adopting this change, of integrating this change, and of really wrapping our culture around this change. And so that's really where I see the struggle, is that leadership teams don't get wrapped around what the initial problem is that the change is for. And that's really where I see the biggest struggle happening.
So it sounds like a lot of focus on making sure your executive leadership team get there first. And then once you have that unity between the groups, it's a lot easier to go out and help the rest of the organization kind of get there.
That's right. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. And I know, the conversations that I've had with Greg and, part of you guys acquiring SourceToad, it seemed like you did a lot of due diligence in making sure that kind of already was a good fit from a high level. And then some of it's just the smaller little nuances that need to be kind of figured out later on. So it sounds like you guys are just very thoughtful about keeping that culture intact in general, because you want to align to organizations that kind of think and act the same way.
Yeah, absolutely. That's been a big point of topic, as we've talked with SourceToad employees. I mean, we, it's funny, the firm I came from previously, I was part of no less than 40 acquisition integrations. And what's really unique, I think, in the SourceToad situation specifically, SourceToad they have such a culture. When you walk in the door, they're such a cool company. You walk in there and you're like, I want to be a Toad. In fact, I have a door code at SourceToad now, just so everybody knows. I have a door code. I claim to be a Toad at heart. I am. I am one of the Toads.
It's not easy to become a Toad. I'm not a Toad, and I've been there a bunch.
Listen,
so
I hate to brag, Matt. I've been there twice. I've been adopted. I am a Toad. If Greg's listening, I am a Toad.
A shirt, though. Have you gotten a shirt or a water bottle?
Yeah, I've gotten a shirt. Have I gotten a shirt, please? I have a shirt. Yes, I have a shirt.
They won't give me one.
I'm sorry, Matt. I do have a shirt. Sorry. But anyway, no, beyond the shirt, the culture there is just so unique and it's so cool. And I know that that's a big point of concern with a lot of the companies that are being acquired is, are we going to lose our identity? Coming in there, I had a week where I went into the SourceToad office and just met with all of the employees, with their HR manager staff, and just sitting down with them. And that was some of the questions that came up. Just, the concern about, are we going to lose our identity? Absolutely not. That's what we actually would love to learn from y'all, how you built this culture, how you did this, because it's so cool. And it's just such a brand recognition, such an identity point for those employees that they are Toads. They are. And that's something that I would like to learn a lot more from Greg about, and just how they did that. But it's just a really strong culture. And it's one where, when we sought out to acquire SourceToad, it was something where, of course, we don't want to take that away. We want to absorb that. We would love for y'all to stay Toads, like remain Toads. It was such a cool culture that we want to be a part of. And partner with, as opposed to, so often when we think of an acquisition, it's the big companies coming in to buy and take away the identity of the smaller company. Right. That's just not it. And so often that's not a successful recipe for acquisitions, and certainly not acquisitions that I've been part of. Everything that I've been part of historically, this new kind of age of acquisitions is, we don't want to buy a company to strip away what they've built. We want to buy that to enrich that and bring it into our culture and support that thriving culture. If you're not doing it that way, I think you're doing it wrong, in my opinion. So,
well, I can tell you it's refreshing, because I was part of a scenario like that in my earlier career back in around 2010, and it didn't quite go that way, right? The culture, we had to kind of become the culture of what was there in the bigger company. And we lost a lot of people through that, to be honest with you. A lot of people just couldn't embrace it, and it was a lot of confusion and noise. So to hear the way you guys approach it is refreshing. Now, taking this back a little bit, because this is what we're hoping to do, is provide some experience for people that may not have the type of experience that you have. And then, you guys have built a culture and you kind of building on that foundation, which is it's there. So now you have the, not luxury, but you have the ability to improve that and then take a culture like SourceToad, find the best things about it and bring it in and incorporate it. When you look at like an earlier stage of a company and like how, because this whole formula, like how do you build culture, right? It's, everybody leads with this. Like, we got great culture, we've got these things, we got benefits, but do you? And like, do policies build culture? Do people build culture? Like, what is your take on like how culture gets built?
Yeah. Yeah. Culture is a funny thing because it's literally everywhere. You know what I mean? When you say, is it in policies? Is it in processes? Yep. Is it in decision making? Yep. Is it in internal messaging? Yep. It's everywhere, right? It would be a lot easier to find places it's not, or a lot harder, I guess, to find places it's not. It's everywhere. It's written, it's non-written. And you know what? It's funny. It shows up in things you're not doing just as much as it shows up in things you are doing. And employees see it in everything. If you say you're a family-oriented culture, right? If you're a family-oriented culture, but you're not offering things like flexible scheduling, no, you're not. If you're a family-oriented culture and you don't have a bereavement policy, are you really a family-oriented culture? If you're a safety-oriented culture, but you're not taking time to run adequate motor vehicle reports on employees before they get behind a company vehicle, behind the wheel of a company vehicle, are you really a safety-centered culture? So absolutely, it shows up in policies. It shows up in your processes, and how you're making decisions. Are you making safe decisions every day? Are you taking safe decisions home with you? We have 800 employees, and I would say no less than 500 of them are behind the wheel of a fleet vehicle. Are we taking safety home with us? So I will tell you that the texting and driving thing has been it's huge. I don't text and drive personally, and it's because of what I've learned through work. I'm not going to tell you in my early 20s I wasn't texting and driving, but when I started working for safety sensitive companies where safety was a huge part of the culture, that's something that I have taken home with me now, because it is. I think about the people on the road, my coworkers on the road. I think about that all the time because it's been ingrained in my mind that the most dangerous thing that I'll do today is drive. And that's true of most all of us, right? The most dangerous thing we'll do today is drive. But I think when it is a culture that you actually live, it does show up in the policies, processes, and decision making that our employees are making every day. And if we live by our culture, then yeah, it's going to show up in every detail. When we ask if it shows up in all those things, it should. And if you're living your culture and if leadership is demonstrating that culture, it will show up in literally everything.
So, I mean, I hadn't really thought of things in that direction until right now, and it makes me rethink, a lot of things. But it almost is like when you've decided your culture, then you almost have to follow that path down every part of your business process to see where it ends up, to make sure it aligns back to the culture then, right? I mean, because I wouldn't have thought about it in that way. But when you mentioned, I have 4 kids.
Yeah.
And I work for, every company says they're family first and all these things, right? And when you carry different jobs, especially sales responsibilities, family first comes second to the end of a quarter, right?
Yeah.
Is if things are needing to be closed or whatever else.
Yep.
So when you're thinking about it from that perspective, that's more, okay, if we are going to own that, and that really is part of our culture, then there needs to be certain things that you have to accept as part of bringing people in to be able to have those types of flexibilities. Yep. So I guess you take that with a checkbox approach. Or, I mean, how do you go about looking into making sure that what you're saying is actually resonating or it feels that way for the employee?
Yeah. Every leader has to start within themselves, I think is how I would answer that. I was very fortunate to have a leader early in my career that she allowed me to be a mom first. She allowed me to be a daughter first, a wife first. And I think that every leader has to take it upon themselves. It's not like, in an 800 person organization, I'm not going to be able to follow up with every single person to make sure that they are actually putting their children first or their husband first or their partner first, whatever it is. Every leader can, and that's really where I can empower leaders to make sure that they are doing that for their employees. I can speak for my team that I want to make sure that every single person on my team puts their kids first, their partners first, their parents first, their siblings first, whatever, their pet, whatever is most meaningful to you outside of this place, I want it to be first, right? And so, when I was fortunate enough to have the leader that I had early in my career, she said, all I ask is that you do this for your people later. Like, all I ask is that you do this for your employees later. And I'm doing that now. And I think that what I can ask of others as I'm leading in the organization as kind of our leader of people in this HR capacity is that's what I ask of the leadership here, is that everybody do that for your employees, and I think that, yes, we do have crunch times where business is crazy and it's the end of the year, or it's the end of the quarter, or it's this or it's that. When you think about, everybody's seen like memes, how cliche it might be, but nobody at the end of their lives or the end of their days is going to look back and be like, I wish I would have sent 5 more emails. I wish I would have, I wish I would have spent 5 more hours at my desk just crunching numbers. You know what I mean? But you are going to say, I wish I would have spent 5 more hours with my kid, or I wish I would have spent 5 more hours with my spouse, or I wish I would have taken that trip, or I wish I would have done this with my mom or my dad or whatever. You are going to wish for those things. And so I don't think there's anybody that's going to wrong you for putting that priority where it should be. It's certainly not on any team I'm leading. And I think that as leaders, we all need to look at it that way. And as long as we are, I think that's what drives culture.
So as far as looking for signs that culture is off in some way, is that from living that like you just explained, or is there other things within the business that you can use as indicators to know? Because not all humans are not aware of themselves, not aware of things that go on, because they're busy and distracted. Are there things that you can do systematically to be able to look for issues within the business that you can be more proactive and become aware of, or how does that work?
Look at people's timesheets. You know what I mean? There are a lot of things that we can do. I think, as a person, look at people's timesheets. That was me being a little bit silly, but truly look at people's timesheets. One thing that I like to look at is PTO banks. How much time are people taking off? You know what I mean? How much time are people taking off? Are people using their PTO? Are people utilizing the time that we are giving them away from work? Are people using their floating holidays, that kind of thing? And I think that's a good way to gauge, are they spending enough time away? Are people taking that time away? And if they're not, why not? And if there are groups of employees that aren't taking time off, why are they not taking time off? Are the project's needs such that they are not able to take time away? And if that's the case, then we really need to look at those project managers. We really need to look at those leaders and start asking questions about what's going on there. Why are they not able to take time off? Or what could we do to reconcile that in a way that's productive? Like, are there ways that we can adequately acknowledge those employees or recognize those employees or give them how can we acknowledge those employees, or how can we make sure that they're getting time away to rest and recharge, that kind of thing? So there are tactical ways to do it, and there are also just human to human ways to do it, right? Just check in with those employees, not about work, not about the project, not what are you working on today? How about how are you doing today? How's it going today? How are you today? Let's separate from work. Let's go grab lunch real quick. Just you and me. Let's go talk about how you're doing. So I think just taking that time to check in on people as humans goes a long way. So there's tactical ways to do it. Yes, looking at the PTO, looking at the timesheets, looking at things like that, just to find trends in the time that people are actually spending at work or behind the wheel, getting to job sites, that kind of thing. And then there's ways to do it just human to human, making sure that you as a leader are taking the time to check in with your employees on a not work front basis, just a human to human basis.
Yeah, I talk about that a lot, but within the platform that we have on the Thanks Crate side, it's not meant to just automate things in a way that become artificial, right? It's meant to be a reminder for people that are busy managers. I was working with one of our clients early on, and they had gotten a note from their HR department saying, hey, we want you to send something over to this person for their anniversary. They've been there 5 years. And that person admitted to me that they didn't know them that well because they had never taken 2 seconds to ask a question outside of a call where they were like, what are you closing this week, or what deals are coming through the cycle, or whatever that is.
Yeah.
And we want to really help people with that. And I guess part of your title, being around HR and leadership development, the leadership development, I'm assuming, is where you're trying to spend that time helping your leadership be more thoughtful about looking at the way the employees are doing their jobs and what effect it may be having on them professionally and personally a little bit, it sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. And then we mentioned SourceToad, and it's an easy one to talk about from, a big moment, right? I've been through a couple of these big moments, mergers, acquisitions, IPOs, things like that. They can be stressful, right? But they also can tell us a lot about the company's culture when you go through that and you absorb, or, whatever that may be, some of these other things. What do these moments really tend to reveal for HR?
Yeah. Trust, right? So these are the biggest moments, I think, both for the acquiring company and the acquired company. It's the biggest moment a company can have, and I think And are you specifically referring to the acquisition moment? Is that like, yeah,
A little bit,
yeah. So I think, in these, it's really, it's funny. It's a lot like dating, isn't it? It's a lot like dating. You go in and you're talking a lot about yourself. Like you're talking a lot about, oh, that Thompson is wonderful. Thompson is all these things. I mean, whatever your company name is, it doesn't fill in the blank, right? You're talking a lot about all the support you can offer, a lot of the benefits you can offer, like literal medical, dental, vision benefits, but also just the benefits of, the support stuff that you offer and all the different development opportunities and things like tuition reimbursement and things, all the different things that you offer to employees. And I think that, you kind of put out all these different offerings that you have and you talk about how great you are, right? It's really like speed dating kind of. You're telling them all these things that are wonderful. And then, it's like it comes to be signing day. And then it's like, okay, now you got to actually do all those things, right? And so it's a big test to just make sure that you live up to the culture that you've sold. And so I think that when you're in that selling phase, you really, like, for someone like me, like I am the seller, right? As the HR person, I am the seller going in there. So it's making sure that we're selling an accurate picture of what we are. And that's something I'm really big on. So authenticity in this process is huge, right? Authenticity on what this culture is, who we are, what we do, how we do it, right? And that's even more important. How we do what we do is huge. And I think that that's one of the reasons I love it. I love talking to people because I'm a very straight shooter when it comes to what we are and who we are and how we do it. And I think that that's one of the things I enjoy the most about this acquisition type process, and that I've been a part of a lot of them, is really selling just what it feels like to be an employee here. And that's really what I go talk about. When I've been on site at SourceToad, when I've been on site doing this with other companies, I'll tell you what it feels like to be an employee here because I do it every day, right? I'm an employee here every day. I got a pretty good sense of our people in my role, and I'll tell you what it feels like to work here. And I'll tell you what it feels like from all the people that I get to talk to every day, which I get to talk to a lot of people. I'm very fortunate to get to talk to a lot of our people every day, and I'll tell you what they tell me too. And here it is. And so that's kind of how I approach the integration process, is speaking the language of our people to a new company. And that's what I love about it. And so I never get nervous about delivering on what I've shared, because I feel that I'm really like a liaison for the people. Like I'm coming in and I'm sharing the stories of our people with a new company, and that's exciting for me. And I love it. Now for the acquired company, I think it's a huge test of their culture as well, because really I think the leader, like Greg in this situation, coming in and telling his people it's going to be okay. Like it's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay. Which he was really taking a lot of trust in us at that time, and conveying that. And, I think, I mean, it's all been great, and we all trusted each other, and I think it's been a beautiful thing. And I think that we're on a great road, and it's been a wonderful fit, and will continue to be a wonderful fit. But all of the Toads, really trusted Greg in that situation, and it really spoke to their culture. And Greg will laugh. I sat down with his leadership team, and right in front of him, I said, when we were kind of in the dating process still, I said, "What's it like to work for Greg?" And he was like, "You're going to ask him that in front of me?" I said, "Yeah, I think it's important. Like, I want to know what it's like to work for you, like to be an employee at SourceToad, because those are the types of questions that I think were important kind of in that matchmaking process, just to know, tell me what it's like to work under Greg. Tell me what his decision making is like. Tell me, because like we mentioned earlier, culture shows up everywhere. So I do want to know what it's like to, how does Greg make decisions about his people? How does Greg make decisions about the business? Those kinds of things. So yeah, those kinds of questions, it gave me a huge understanding of the culture at SourceToad, and it helped me to understand who they were. And it told me they trust him. 100% his employees trust him, and they trusted him through the process. And I think it worked out beautifully. And yeah, it was a huge testament to their culture.
It sounds like this is, though, a very important place. If you're a business leader, right, and you're bringing your company over like this, and your company has that much faith, and Greg is he's in the top leadership in the Tampa Bay market that I've ever met, right? He's just a good human all the way through. But when you're talking about leaders that have multiple objectives in these scenarios, right? It's financial, there's some self-benefit from these type of things. I think it is so important, though, like for a leader in that scenario, to not lower their standards or values while having these types of really strong conversations with someone like Thompson about what that means to the business. And again, like you said, if you sold that and couldn't deliver on the other end of it, it's hard, right, to do that. So this sounds like, for me at least, at a high level, when you're going through something like this, it's probably one of the more important areas, because the rest, the finance, the legal, that's handled, right? It's a certain way that'll go through.
Yeah.
But the marriage of this business, right, comes through the scenario you just described. I almost think it's probably the most important part in order for it to succeed later on, right? You could get through it And I think we've all seen the companies that made it through this stage, and then the outcome later on, 10 years later, you're just like, oh man, there was so much that could have been there.
Yeah.
But maybe there was some, not so truths or something going on in that
Yeah.
relationship part of
Yeah. Yeah.
the dating.
Yeah. The
So it sounds like this
dating
is
part is I went to a symposium, a merger and acquisition symposium earlier or later last year, and they called it the gravy. Like they're like the finance, like to your point, the finance, the lawyering will lawyer itself, like all those things, right?
yes.
But then there's the gravy to it. So it's like it's everything that doesn't fall into one of those big buckets, right? Like you have everything else lined out, like all that stuff, all the big pieces have been lined out, but it's the gravy. It's the personalities. It's the everything that goes into the culture. It's how you talk to your employees. It's what you talk to your employees about. It's who messages what to employees. It's how the leader has made decisions with employees up to that point. It's talking about high performers and what are their expectations in their careers. And it's all, that's the gravy, right? Like that's the part that if you don't talk about that early on, if you don't talk about that early and often and all through the process and then keep talking about it, you've missed a big boat. And that's where I think a lot of deals can really fall short. To your point, like 10 years down the line, you're like, holy cow, we missed a lot of opportunities to capitalize on this and intro into other markets or put this person in a seat where they could have been far more successful. I mean, you just miss so much. If you don't capitalize on the gravy, you miss so much of what that acquisition could have been. And so I think where my vote is that we have really capitalized on the gravy here. I think with SourceToad, I'm excited about it.
It's the heartbeat. I mean, and listen, knowing Greg, it's the most important thing at SourceToad, right? And when I heard about this early on and I started hearing about you guys, and like you could tell that there was a lot of, synergy between the companies based on that. And even the companies that I've been involved with where we went through that, one of them did really well. And like the whole company every day came together as a team and we went somewhere. We grew the company from 30 million to 230 million in like 3 years, right? The other company did okay for a minute and then kind of didn't do okay a couple years later because it wasn't a good marriage. Like there just wasn't that relationship. But I guess you mentioned earlier too, Greg has a bit of remote employees there at SourceToad. I don't know, does Thompson have a lot of remote employees in general? Like what extra pressure or how do you keep the remote employee, I guess, how do you keep that part of the culture intact when you're going through things, not just like this, but in general? Does that have any effect on how you're doing this at all? Or
Yeah.
because we are in a pretty remote world now where a lot of people are dealing with remote employees.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the post pandemic world is different from that aspect. I mean, everybody is dealing with that, right? Like it's not like I think that pre-pandemic it was like some companies did that and some companies did it. Now everybody does it, right? So we do have some remote workforce at Thompson. Prior to our acquisition of SourceToad, we were really specific to we have a lot of field workers, right? We have a lot of engineers that are out in the field, so we didn't have as much of that remote workforce. But I mean, I think remote workers it's everywhere now, so it's a really common. This is a really common platform to be kind of diving into. It's a really common thing that a lot of employers are dealing with, and it's not anything different than what I said before, as far as just making sure that you understand your audience and making sure that you're catering to that audience base, right? So I think that aligning that culture to meet those needs of all different kinds of workspaces and people is really important. And I think as long as you stay true to your core culture, it can be it's scalable, right? So training and making sure that your leaders are trained to engage with all different kinds of all different kinds of employees, and that they can represent those different workspaces, and they can be agile, right? You have to have adaptable and agile leadership, and you have to train that, right? So training leaders to make sure that they can engage with employees. So when we're talking about just asking employees how they are, it is a bit more intentional. You do have to be more intentional with remote workers, right? You do have to be more, it takes a phone call. It's not just a pop down the hall. It's not just a pop into their office, that kind of thing. You have to be more intentional with it, but knowing your audience, knowing when you can reach out to people and making sure that you're doing that, it takes a little bit more intentionality, but that's part of culture too, is intentional culture is it's all the more important with the remote workforce. So I think just making sure that you're training your leadership to understand that audience just as much as you're understanding your in-person audience, and being intentional about maintaining and kind of keeping that culture for those virtual folks as well.
Yeah, I mean, training it's something that a lot of companies just lack in general. I've been in the training business for a while as far as just putting process and training in place. And like, I think a lot of companies overlook that and just expect there to be some sort of knowledge transfer when you inherit people at a different, in different stages of their career, but it's not ever true. One of the things that I wanted to talk about was, the common myths around culture where people just think that, this is things you have to do, whatever that may be, and then where they go wrong. I thought that would be a really fun place to kind of close out with our conversation around these myths, right? There's a lot of things that people think, oh, I have to do all these things to build a great culture. And like, what parts of that you believe that is good and what's not true? Is there anything fun you can share with us there?
I think the biggest misconception about culture is really that it's hard, right? Well, it's not hard. It's not hard. Or that it's this big, like overwhelming, like it's really not, right? Just do right by your people. Do right by your people. Mm-hmm. Treat people the way that they want to be treated, right? Show them that you care about them. Another quote that I really like is, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, right? I think that's a Teddy Roosevelt quote.
That's a great one.
You can preach knowledge and you can preach anything that you want, but until somebody knows that you actually care about them, they don't care how much you know. So show your people that you care about them. Again, that can come through in a variety of different ways. It can be just a, how are you today? Not how's the project you're working on? Not how are you coming against that deadline? Nothing like that. Ask them how they're doing. And then it really starts building culture. When people know that you're authentic, authenticity is huge. Authenticity builds culture. It builds trust, which builds culture. But it's really not like a huge, we talk about culture, and I think a lot of people just get this misconception that it's this overwhelming, huge thing that they have to build. It's really just being kind to people. It's really just being authentic and building trust with people and being yourself. That's what it is. That's where it starts. And you just have to start. You just have to get started with that and then build on it. That's what it is. If you are being a good, authentic, genuine human, that's where it starts. And it's not a hard, overwhelming thing.
Well, I award you the hashtag The Good Human Company. So you're definitely a supporter of the mentality that I share.
Good.
If you're not authentic, then what are you, right? And I think people, they see through it. So
that's right.
Christian, I very much appreciate the time we've had here today with you. I can't thank you enough. I've learned a lot along the way already myself, and we really appreciate your time here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Matt. This has been fun. I appreciate it.